Hey, what up, guys? It's Anti-Liam. I've got an anti-taste in music, and today we're gonna be learning how to not pay artists for commissions. Reacting to some shitty emo music. This is good. This is good. What are you doing that? Why is your eye twitching? It's not meant to be twitching like that. It's not meant to be twitching like that. You don't look so good. Do you know another slave I could get on shorter notice? Because it looks like your run time's kind of running out. Oh, what's this? This. What the fuck is this? Weezer. Poor unfortunate Weezer. The band that perfectly encapsulates the famous saying from The Dark Knight that goes, and I quote, "You either make good music or you'll suck." The American act grew to prominence in the 90s with their debut record that would not only cement frontman River Cuomo's love of primary colours, but the band's legacy as one of the best artists of that decade, despite being newbies. Now their career might not have been the kindest to them and went to them faster than your mum, but that's something we'll explore today. Because for some reason I'm being roped in to rank every Weezer album to fulfil the dying wish of myself. So strap yourselves in, get some water, and just get ready because this is about to get really bad. Okay, let me just fill my glass for this one. Yep. Can't forget the mixer. Can't forget the mixer. It's not really a drink, but it's just a little bit. Just there we go. Yeah, prior to this whole video, I knew this album was coming about, and I just thought it can't be as bad. It can't be as bad as I thought it was, or I remember it being when I listened to it years and years ago. I thought maybe like some sort of like adolescent haze that that natural teenage hyperbole was kicking in. This couldn't have been like a 1 out of 10 album like so many people think it is. Surely not. Like it can't be that bad. Roll the clip. So I'm listening to Can't Stop Partying. I wanted to archive this reaction. Oh, why did they do this? Yeah, there's a reason why this isn't just the lowest rated Weezer record on Rate Your Music, but the bottom of this list either. It's pretty much the antithesis of what Weezer stood for, or well, used to stand for prior to the pop-heavy shift circa make-believe, but with Raditude, the band dived right into the deep end. Maybe the shallowing consider need to be pretty damn foolish to think a song like I'm Your Daddy and Can't Stop Partying would come off as anything other than utterly hilarious, and not in a way the band intended. Surreal scene critics at the time were actually fairly lenient on it compared to other work, with places like Pitchfork opting for a timid rating of 4.5, and certain music journalists saying things like, "Musically, Raditude really sounds like vintage Weezer, but never in a pandering planned out way," and "When it comes to taunting and baiting the crowd, Cole makes every other rock star out there look like a dilettante." They were, as you can imagine, very, very, very much off the mark when it came to this album, but it's not like the band themselves didn't know that this was going to be like sonically clunky or just completely off the mark for a Weezer record in general. In an interview with The Waster, guitarist Brian Bell had this to say, knowing fine well this wasn't a good direction to go down.
"I did have a conversation with Rivers about it, and he said, to put my mind at ease, that this is just one album out of many more that we are going to make in our career. When I heard that, I was like, okay, cool. Well, that's a great way to think of it. We're just trying something, and this is just one record out of many more. When I heard that, I was fine with it.
So band members seem rightfully anxious about this record during the whole of production, and what they really ended up providing us was an album that loses all sense of identity that Weezer had, dipping their toes in waters that they just had no right in ever diving into, and in general it lacks any like the cohesiveness that most Weezer albums have. They might not all be good because of it, but they've at least kind of got that going into their favour. There's always some sort of like general togetherness that Raditude just lacks. It lacks a lot of things. Entertainment and fun and good songs being three crucial ones. Just even having that dog on the front cover, like that could maybe have bumped it up, maybe made it a bit more kind of wholesome looking, like another Weezer album that we'll talk about. But you know that dog doesn't want to be there. You know that dog's seen better days. You know we should help that dog out, old Yella style. Also, Rainn Wilson told Rivers to go with Raditude for the title, so for having any involvement with this album whatsoever, the office is now cancelled. I don't make the rules, I just enforce them. Things I like about this album: turning up the radio has some nice guitars during its verses. Yeah, they're tinged enough to tug at some sort of guilty pleasure valve in my heart. Yeah, that's about it. The album that eventually made Rivers and Co. go, hey, maybe we should take a wee break for a couple of years. You'll probably think to yourself about how disjointed this entire record is, how it feels like a bunch of cutting room floor clippings all impolitely chucked together, baked for a few hours and chucked out to the audience, and yeah, you'd be right. Despite Rivers announcing that the opposite was true and that Death to False Metal logically follows Hurley, the record released prior to this album is just a compilation LP, and oh boy does it show. The structure of it has no rhyme or reason to it, and even then that wouldn't matter so much if the songs themselves didn't just suck ass. Rumour has it that I'm a Robot is technically considered a form of abuse in 12 US states, and that number spikes dramatically when you bring in Unbreak My Heart into the equation, often regarded by myself as the worst export from America since the War on Terror in Imagine Dragons. Even the track that I just praised a few minutes ago is a flimsy put together project that Rivers conceived by collaborating with different people over YouTube and the internet. It feels really like just kind of rushed together, and really I don't feel that I should talk about this album any longer than I already have, because why should I talk about an album longer than Weezer spent consciously thinking that it was going to be a good idea? Why? Fucking why? I know the general consensus of Pacific Daydream was it's bad, but it's not that bad, but I really think it's too late to give it that accolade. Things start off bearable with Mexican Fender having a somewhat charm to it that makes it nice enough on a good day and White Noise on the bad one, but then things get really, really bad. Feels like Summer is a bastardized Weezer, 100% is, and you cannot change my opinion on that. Mixing the worst elements of every chart rock act at the moment, most notably Modern Day Fall Out Boy, and some Rivers Como clone that you created via DNA fragments found in a Big Bang Theory box set to take on singing duties, you'll get a general vibe as to what this song tries to be. It's a song artfully infested with cliches and compromised with elements that have no right being thrown together just hastily as they were. Actually, that comment of mine isn't really unjustified. It's not just me being blatantly hyperbolic for the sake of it, because in an interview with Entertainment Weekly where basically Rivers Cuomo talked about how they went about making a Weezer album.
When I'm writing a song and I get stuck, instead of trying to force myself to feel inspired, I can just go into spreadsheet and search. There are usually 10 to 15 options. I just try them out to see which ones work magically.
Yep, you heard that right. Rivers literally went Microsoft Excel on this bitch, and the end result pretty much reads like some Always Sunny side B plot where Mac and Charlie tried to make a robot capable of making the next chart hit. Wait, was that an episode or not? Nah, it's not. Folks, please give me money. Even without discussing Feels Like Summer, Pacific Daydream is littered with horribly conceived ideas that were executed just as horribly. Beach Boys is clearly meant to be some ode to the eponymous band, at least lyrically, but the fact it's so rife with generic guitars and other effects, especially vocals, makes it such a bland experience that it eventually becomes unnaturally grating. You'd be hard pressed finding a song that can bore your tears with how conventional it is like this song. Maybe the worst thing about this record is that, much like Raditude, it kind of has no real identity. It's totally void of one, much like The Simpsons episode 4 season 7. Weezer just lack a soul, and it's utterly depressing having to listen to this album. And I think they kind of went for commercial viability here, and it utterly blew up in their face, because this was the first album since Pinkerton that didn't manage to hit the top 10 in the Billboard. And if you've listened to this album, if my description did manage to paint the picture, you kind of get a real feeling why a lot of people think that this resurgence, the revival of Weezer over the course of their 2016 and 2014 record, they feel that, yeah, that was kind of misplaced faith, because really they seem to be going in a direction that we kind of saw them go during a lot of the noughties. So yeah, people are worried. I'm hoping this Black Album manages to restore some sort of hope in Weezer. So at this point in this video, you're probably getting a bit sick of me constantly referring to Rivers in terms of all the creative decisions, and that's because that was totally intentional. I'm not just lazy and just did this script at the last minute. Absolutely not, because for a lot of people prior to Red Album, they thought that Weezer was pretty much just a vessel for Rivers to basically go about doing like his whole kind of like music stuff. Like Pinkerton was a very Rivers-centric project, and really none of the other members, bar like maybe like a backing falsetto and the bare minimum of instrumentals, they really didn't seem to get much of a voice in it. That totally changed with the Red Album though. If you have a look at the credits for Red, you'll see Rivers isn't the only one on lead vocal duties, or even when it comes to writing. Brian Bell, Scott Shrine and Patrick Wilson all get a chance to show off their pipes, and they really don't amount to much at all. In fact, they kind of tank this album a fair amount, of the only salvageable elements, ironically enough, being Rivers songs, or at least some of them. The prospect of Red Album was to be more ambitious and go down avenues the band hadn't gone down previously, and some of the songs we get as a result make you want to commend this action before you realise what the band's creative decisions have been like on previous entries on this list. Of course, the song everyone will remember from Red is actually a song that came about at last minute due to the label being too worried about its commercial viability, that track being Pork and Beans. You'd think that pressure would lead to a weak song that panders to a chart-appealing tea and sacrifice with wit and identity, but you'd be dead wrong. While it may be a bit regressive, its chorus feeling like it could be ripped straight out of a Blue Demos compilation, it still packs a punch, and the humorous quips that were in stark protest to Geffen Records' tinkering are all pulled off pretty efficiently. Let's mention the creative ventures here though, and the peak of that might be The Greatest Man That Ever Lived, a song that really could be considered a jarring listen by a lot of people, myself included the first time listening to this, but it's pretty ambitious, I need to be honest, with the band trying to like balance around about 12 different styles of just music in general, ranging from kind of like Green Day, which is a pretty kind of bare bones impersonation, one that I didn't really realise it was Green Day until I looked it up, but other ones like Nirvana and Aerosmith even doing some Bach at one point. It really shouldn't work all that well when you describe it like how I am, but when you listen to it, it just manages to balance so many different kind of like musical aesthetics. It just ends up being like a really, really good single as far as I'm concerned. Mary, could you press, is it stop recording? Could you press the button? It's not a flawless record, as I said. The other members of the band don't really make their inclusions, and they're kind of like writing and lead vocal credits all that necessary, and Rivers doesn't exactly come out of this looking all that great either, with Heart songs being just a really, really painful song that's incredibly hard to endure with just how cheesy it is. I really can't get across how weak the hook is on it, like one of the weakest hooks of the noughties, just so utterly lazy. But is it a bad album? I don't know if I'd go as far as saying it's a bad album, other than it being like a really meh one that has like a quite a good EP line within it. I feel like for a lot of noughties kids like myself, Make Believe will have been the first Weezer record you'll have come across. At least in May 2005, the fifth album by the band was initially meant to come out a lot sooner, with recording for the record being done prior to their previous LP Maladroit, So essentially it was an album that was 3 years in the making. As a result, it's no surprise to hear this is the band's longest record, clocking in at 45 minutes, and boy do you feel it. Let's be real though, you're not here for me to talk about the long production, the messy production, just the overall history of this album. You're here for me to talk about that song. Yep, you know that it was coming. The song you probably heard a million times on Kerrang while you were playing with your iPod Touch. Beverly Hills is a big kahuna of Make Believe and is the best selling Weezer song ever, reaching the 10th spot in the Billboard Hot 100, 41 and 47 places above Close Competition Perfect Situation and Undone the Sweater Song, respectively. Sales don't really have an impact on the quality of the song though, and Beverly Hills is good. Maybe there's a hint of nostalgia impact in my opinion, but from the simple boom boom clap melody to river sincere yet sarcastic lyrics about yearning for a glamorous life to that hook of it's got a lot going for it to be a pretty fun pop rock track that isn't miles away from the material found on their first 2 records, but is distinctly second era Weezer. How does the rest of this album fare though? While you're watching this list, so you can imagine not all that well. This is such a pity, a 70s-esque ballad that just does not mesh with the overall sound of this album. And speaking of the sound of this album in general, it's largely sterile. The band admits on the making of Make Believe that they did try and tap into fans' love of the first 2 records, but wanted to make something new.
I just hope people hear and they think of it, brings back the feelings that they got, you know, maybe on the first couple. And I hope it exists simply as a record people would want to listen to, you know, devoid of any associations to any other record or period.
Sadly though, a lot of cuts on here do resemble scraps from the cutting room floor of Blue, Pinkerton and Green, while others tap into a pop heavy sound that feel all too artificial. Granted, there are songs on here that warrant a listen, such as Other Way, a genuine song written by Rivers about an ex-girlfriend whose partner committed suicide, as well as the previously mentioned Beverly Hills and We Are All on Drugs. So overall, Make Believe isn't the worst album ever, it's not even the worst Weezer album ever, but it did mark a downward spiral for Weezer, for which a lot of people do kind of hold a grudge against this record, not so much for what it is, but for what it represented. It's not really a 2 out of 10 album, but it doesn't really deserve more than a 4 out of 10 on a lenient day. Back to basics, a 10-track record that lasts just over half an hour. Weezer signed to a new label, and off the back of the band's worst album, Raditude, Hurley really couldn't fail. It literally just had to show up and not get Lil Wayne on board, and it would be a better project. Also, that front cover of the character of Hurley from Lost, it feels like it kind of radiates so much wholesomeness that it really couldn't be bad. It really couldn't be bad. And it's pretty decent. I really can't pinpoint a horrible moment on Hurley. It really is just an artly, serviceable record, which is what fans were praying and begging for. Lead single Memories is just daft power pop, but considering the band's noughties history, it's not all that disingenuous, and there's a pretty good song to get pumped up to, even if it does feel like it could fit nicely into a Diary of a Wimpy Kid trailer. It's not a complete back to basics record here, but at least sees Weezer go back to the make believe stage in their lives, and that charm can still be found on here, even if there's some misplaced angsty lines about cutting critics down to size, which sounds more like an Eminem lyric than a Rivers Cuomo one. Where's My Sex is probably the lowest point on Hurley. Its cheesiness and attempt at humour being a little bit too much, like a really, really raw, mature cheddar. That being said, it's got a heaviness to it during the verses that feel almost Maladroit-esque, so even at the lowest moments on here, there's at least something redeemable to get you through the rough patches, though Where's My Sex pop sheen does make it a little bit too murky. Out of all the mainline Weezer records, Hurley is probably the one that I have like the least personal attachment to, but I guess that gives me a great deal of kind of objectivity here to be able to look at it and see how it compares to the rest of the discography, unlike something like Make Believe, where I do have a sense of like nostalgia for it because of how I listened to it, when I listened to it, even though I can admit that album is pretty mediocre at best. But with Hurley, it's just fine. It's just the definition of just a decent album. You can probably see why for a lot of people they were kind of hoping that this could be the resurgence, not because this album was any good, but because it showed that, hey, they're not dreadful. That's at least a foundation for them to work with. So yeah, wasn't really worthy of being put on anyone's like worst albums of 2010, but definitely wasn't enough to kind of even make a blip on the radar of honourable mentions. Maladroit. Maladroit. Not ardois, which means skillful, means awkward, clumsy, inept. I'm not really sure why I'm reading it out. I just thought it'd make me sound smarter, and I wasn't even reading the book, I was clearly looking at the screen there. But yeah, anyway, while I'll say, don't listen to Rick's horrible opinion on Twitter about this record. He's not talking that much shite when it comes to Weezer's fourth record. We haven't really discussed the sound of Weezer's first 3 albums because, spoiler alert, they're appearing later on this list. But a reason why Maladroit remains both an underrated LP in many people's eyes and an outlier in others is down to the shift in sound. Prior to Weezer stuck to their pop power silence with tinges of emo and garage, not really ever diving off into the deep end due to what kind of scene they were brought up against. The year was 2001 though, when Maladroit was recorded, and music was seeing bands like Linkin Park being the cool kids, both critically and commercially. So 3 records down, and with a new member to the band, this time Scott Schreiner taking over the place of bassist Mikey Welsh, it seemed like going down this more kind of like heavier route wouldn't be so jarring when you're already shaking up kind of like the structure of your band. You might as well do the same with what you guys are playing. And with the utmost pleasure, I can announce that we're in the good portion of Weezer's discography, because while this album certainly aims for quantity over quality at points, when they set up their aim and they go for it, their accuracy is just near perfect. American Gigolo probably benefits most from the more metal-esque riffage on here. I think there's a wonderful intro that's brisk pace, kind of feels like a predecessor or template that the likes of Queens of the Stone Age would eventually tinker with to near rock perfection. Dope Nose came about the same night the Green Album's Hashpipe was recorded, and it does feature the same sort of rock star attitude that almost makes you forget that Rivers was rocking a Heisenberg beard at the time. Not a good look. Keep Fishing is easily one of the most catchiest tracks Weezer's ever crafted, with at least a few different parts that could overpower most rock songs' choruses in terms of their ability to echo inside your head. That being said though, there is a certain disingenuousness about this record, especially when the second half of this album kind of dampens how front-loaded it is. It really doesn't manage to keep its momentum going for it, and even though I'm not against bands going for a new sound or basically trying something new, it did feel like Weezer weren't going all the way with this kind of like more heavier kind of aesthetic here. They just weren't going all the way with it, and it feels like it feels a bit kind of half-arsed in that sense. So while I do think it is a good album, I can obviously see why a lot of fans at the time, and even on reflection, why people kind of saw this as a kind of worrying moment where their favourite band was becoming something that they didn't want them to ever become. And while that album eventually came about and didn't sound anything like this one, you can kind of understand why there was that worrying phase at this point. Their first album since Pinkerton, and their first album after a 5-year hiatus, Weezer saw themselves bring in Mikey Welsh, who sadly passed away back in 2011, I believe. He took over the place of Matt Sharp for just this album. This was their second self-titled effort, and for a lot of people, they look back on this Weezer album as being not as good as the first two, but still pretty good all things considered. And yeah, I can totally agree with that sentiment. Seeing as Green saw the band really lay into the power pop sound you're all too sick of me hearing me mention so far, we should go through this record by its singles, the first being Hash Pipe, which is often found amongst the band's most popular songs. Recorded after Rivers took a bunch of Ritalin and had a few shots of tequila, Hash Pipe sees the band tell the story about a prostitute something the label got extremely pissed at, considering Rivers went on to mention it said prostitute was both gay and transsexual in subsequent interviews. The song itself goes at a sonic gritty pace, with Rivers showing off some of his most playful vocals to date. It's really no surprise that this song saw itself become a favourite for many despite its controversy at the time. Then there's Island in the Sun, possibly one of the most relaxing songs you'll ever hear. It's the ideal track to have on loop during a warm summer's day while drinking that lovely H2O. Lastly, we get Photograph, a tight little track that clocks in at just under 2.5 minutes, and it doesn't waste a single second, possessing a lot of the same traits of Blue Era Weezer, Beach Boy-esque vocal arrangements, clapping and gnarly guitars, the whole shebang. I do feel like Green is a little bit front-loaded, its best songs coming in the first third of it, but it never really does hit any sort of tragic moment throughout here. For a lot of people, maybe they wanted more of that sound that they kind of tinkered with on Pinkerton, that darker style, but really with what we got, I can't exactly be mad with what the eventual result was. The moment everyone just collectively let out a sigh. No, we didn't just get a Weezer record in 2014 that was decent, but even one that was good. We got one that was pretty good. Everything will be alright in the end. It isn't a perfect record that can kind of go head to head with Pinkerton or Blue, but it's definitely one that, despite its flimsy ending that makes it go out in a fizzle, not a bang, just manages to basically refine and show that Weezer are good, that they can still hit out with some just really good rock music. Back to the Shack is the track you'll heard every critic heard when it comes to discussing Everything Will Be Alright in the end, but there's no real surprise why. Showing that trademark self-awareness, Back to the Shack takes on a great deal of sincereness, with Rivers apologising to his fans for dodgy ventures over the past few releases, as well as personal resolutions with his partner and family. The chorus is also a belter in of itself, something that's a commodity when it comes to this album. This bridge almost sounds like some sort of nerdy kamikaze call, with Rivers professing that this might be the band's final chance to find relevancy before they test fans' final nerves, and that sort of attitude would have served them well on all their future releases, especially Pacific Daydream, which maybe gets a bit too complacent. I hesitate to call Everything Will Be Alright and end as a return to traditional Weezer, but more an ideal playground where ideals from different eras can get along well and result in some goofy gems. Da Vinci really shouldn't work as well as it does, what with its make-believe-esque verse featuring a comforting bass and whistling being stark contrast to its debut-ish chorus, but I can't really deny how its ridiculousness works so much in its favour, establishing a charm that the band hadn't tapped into for nearly a decade. That 4-year hiatus did Weezer so much good. Again, it's not a flawless record by any stretch of the imagination, but I do reckon that with this balanced mindset that meant that they were refining as opposed to changing up what they usually do, it meant that you got some of the most fun rock music of 2014, and for Weezer that was an achievement after what had came before. So we're in the top 3, and if you thought that the bronze medalist here was only getting it because the silver and gold were so good that they were basically just the best of the worst, you'd be so far away from the truth, because if Everything Will Be Alright in the end was Weezer trying to balance things off, then the White Album is Weezer just going right for that Green Album vein with the proficiency of their debut. Thank God for Girls efficiently lures listeners in with its sweeping guitars and all-out wackiness. Analysis of the lyrics will have any old-school Weezer fan overjoyed with their trademark nerd rock ways, digging into the culture of Dungeons and Dragons, while also having some fun with the hot topic that is feminism, playing with some stereotypes and going as far to reenact Genesis 2. The band members may have been nearing their 50s at the time, but they still had a way with words. The fact that White Album is a concept album is one that can be realised from the get-go, and one that never feels too obvious. Following frontman Rivers' personal experiences with LA, this is very much a record that manages to recreate a location through sound alone and tell a story alongside it with relative ease. Whether you're tired of Weezer singing about geeky romance and heartbreak is up to you, but it certainly gives some cheesy lyrics a pass when you consider the nature of the protagonist. We're not here for a story, though the inclusion of one certainly makes it feel like less of a cash grab by exploiting their old sound and rather a more ambitious release. In fact, the best songs on here are the ones built on that aforementioned Tale of Como, most notably Do I Get High, that kicks off a gnarly grunge drum before kicking into some obvious subject matter. As Como described, it's a really yucky and intentional and comfortably portrayal of the addict's life. There's nothing sexy, fun or funny about it, though thankfully it results in one of the best tracks on display here. There's an obvious criticism that can be made that Weezer rely a bit too heavily on the framework that got them to where they were, but I'm in the mindset that whenever they do something that sounds vaguely familiar, there's always something that really does kind of distract you from that, whether that be just some like playful lyricism, whether that just be some playful vocals, whether that just be just your interest being piqued by just some of the best kind of like rock hooks of 2016. Yeah, I can definitely see why people weren't as big on this as I may have been, because of the general attitude towards Weezer at that point, and maybe because when it came to looking at rock music at that time, they were looking for something a bit more different. This was obviously the same year that other bands from the 90s were kind of like still making music as well, and making some very different ambient atmospheric releases, so having a very just kind of like goofy kind of pop rock album wouldn't be as cool and could be looked at in a far more negative way. But as far as I'm concerned, White Album just manages to replicate a lot of the same feelings I do get from Blue Album, and for a band that had just released the album two decades later and showed that they could do it, I think that's an achievement within itself. An utterly fun album that I just like a great deal. So before I praise this sacred cow until the cows come home, I think it's worth mentioning that this record isn't perfect or a 10 out of 10 as I'd previously thought. Call me oversensitive or judging a 90s record by current standards, but Pink Triangle, while melodic and nice in ears, just features some of the most perilous I've ever heard. I want to believe it's all a big act and maybe that it can tie into the concept somehow, but it really does kind of test my patience. Other songs like Across the Sea can come across as creepy, but it ties into, like I say, the concept. It just kind of adds to the core of what makes Pinkerton the polar opposite of Blue, at least thematically. Now, let's start praising here. Get You is one of the best tracks on here. The manages kind of like touch on to that whole nerdy element of Blue Album, but kind of like does it in a bit more kind of like an angsty, aggressive route, which for some people might have felt like they were basically becoming what they were basically the antithesis of. But for me, I don't think they really ever lose that sort of identity in terms of what makes Weezer at their very core. And the way that this works is kind of a juxtaposition to how the closing track Butterfly works. It's a lot more kind of like it's a more of a calmer song here, where basically the whole concept of this record being based off a 1904 opera where I believe it's Madame Butterfly meets a character named Pinkerton. They kind of fall in love. He goes back to America, comes back with his wife. She basically commits suicide. It's very much the way that I interpret it is being both the kind of like embodiment of Pinkerton's very like negative mindset, but maybe just kind of like how rock stars kind of like live a bit, where they're kind of just very reckless. They go about just doing things without ever thinking of the repercussions. And while I don't think this is like some sort of like mirror image of what Rivers was doing at the time, by no means am I saying that, but maybe it was meant to be some sort of like commentary on that in a very kind of like extreme fashion by taking influence from Eastern culture. Okay, later note. Terrorist Sex is a stunning opener, a song I've listened to more times than I'm willing to admit, that conjures up all those feelings of angst the band managing their debut and then some. Rivers' personal depressive mindset shown in itself as soon as it begins, with its apathy, the rockstar lifestyle, meaningless sexual encounters with groupies, all over a rawer, more experimental style for the band explored by a new recording style where the band just chose not to overdub. Speaking of rawness, the creative decisions for Pinkerton went far past the album itself. As you'll know from this video so far, Weezer has a very good track record music video wise, but when given the chance to work with Spike Jonze, Rivers Cuomo rejected it, saying,
I really don't want the songs to come across untainted this time around. I really want to communicate my feelings directly, and because I was so careful in writing that way, I'd hate for the video to kind of misrepresent that song, or the song, or exaggerate certain aspects.
That eagerness to make himself feel undirect, to make him feel raw, comes across in different styles. A Good Life is one of the poppiest cuts off here, but I think the reason why a lot of people like myself like it to the extent that we do is because how it never loses that kind of same vision. The Good Life, like I say, is a very poppy cut, but it also still kind of like sees Rivers kind of lamenting on how isolated he feels, how this is getting to him in a way. It's just it manages to go about it in a way that sounds very fun, but once you start thinking about it, it never feels like it's kind of like misplaced or it doesn't quite fit what we were going for here. Yet Pink Triangle is a song that I never really feel I can kind of get over with its kind of lyrical context. People can obviously argue that maybe it fits into the concept and that it's not meant to be taken as serious, but I still feel a bit kind of iffy on it. But bar that though, this is pretty close to being a 10 for me. It's a very ambitious release. It was a very daring release for Weezer, and I'm glad that it's looked back upon more positively than critics looked at it on at the time. But if this record that people critically plays all the time is only second, then it only makes sense that the winner here is going to be a record that we need to kind of go back a few years prior to Pinkerton to get a feel of.
Okay, kids, Arnold's is proud to present Kenosha, Wisconsin's own.
Welcome to one of the earliest members of the Perfect Club, baby, Population Blue. The Eponymous debut record released in 1994 is often cited by many snobby PMC users as either one of the most quintessential records of the decade or one of the most overrated. Considering what video you're watching, you won't be surprised to hear me say that I think it's undoubtedly the former. The thing to bear in mind when you listen to Blue Album is the kind of, I want to say historical context for that. It sounds like I'm being very kind of like hyperbolic here, but it's essentially what Rivers Cuomo kind of like was picking on when it came to making this album was just how different it was to what was prevalent at the time. I remember just being totally shocked at how little people responded to us because I thought we were so good. I mean, we were playing the same songs that eventually became big hits, like the Sweater song and Say It Ain't So, and we play them out in the LA clubs, but they'd just be like, go away, we weren't a grunge band. So grunge was the cool thing in the 90s, and what Weezer mainly tinkered with was kind of garage rock beats barbershop quartet, so pretty much not a cool thing. But because of how kind of like unconventional geeky it kind of sounded, that kind of gave it this edge. When reviewers were talking about it, NME said how it gave emo its melodic wing, and others saying how it was basically just like power pop perfection, and both those statements I feel are utterly true. Can't believe I'm agreeing with NME for once. Where the hell did I start praising this record? Do we go with Buddy Holly, hosting not only the best music video of the band's career, but one of the catchiest hooks of the 90s, in addition to one of the smartest songs River Cuomo has ever written, with a plethora of references to both mid-20th century TV that creates a fun atmosphere throughout? Well, until the bridge, where the very real fear of war leaks in, and somehow River ties into not only social commentary that resonates with the Asian community in the 90s, but also uses it to further paint the introverted, geeky character that the Blue Album is so affiliated with. I could also mention what I reckon is the best closing track of the 90s, Only in Dreams. Matt Sharp's fuzzy warm bass guitar holding you in a warm embrace as you float through a spin on the common rom-com trope of boy gets girl, further adding to that nerdy demeanour I mentioned earlier. I used to only have one gripe with this record, which came from No One Else, a track I took on face value as an actual desire that Rivers yearned for, with really toxic behaviour being so nonchalantly thrown about. Then I use the power of context to, not get myself out of a rut created by making a dog respond to anti-Semitic comments that are as funny as a stroke, but see that it leads into the following song, The World Has Turned and Left Me Here, where this character, most likely a jock type to tie in to the cliches that bands play with, is abandoned and left to face the repercussions of such horrible behaviour. His deluded attitude and Rivers' witty lines about "I just made love your sweet memory 1,000 times in my head, you say you love it more than ever," makes me laugh every time in just a truly satisfied way. I could really go on about this album for a whole video in itself and talk about other songs like Say It Ain't So, My Name's Jonas, In the Garage. Really, this is just an album that's full of highlights, a highlight album full of highlights basically, and it's the earliest 10 out of 10 album I've ever listened to. Take note of that if you care about albums that I deem perfect. And I think even if people don't agree with how passionate I'm about this, how it's basically just kind of like Beach Boys instrumentation but with a different flair, but still manages to kind of like tug at that same heartstring, I think you could probably still look at it fondly, knowing just the kind of cultural significance of it. Even nowadays, people still look back on this as being just a hugely influential record for them, if not personally, then even in their music themselves, especially when you look at slacker rock musicians as well. So yeah, that's basically just of it. Blue Album is my favourite Weezer record. Maybe it's yours, maybe it's not. Let me know in the comments down below what you think. But thank you for watching this, guys. This has been I want to say a pretty ambitious video. I know it's not perfect, but it's kind of like what I'm wanting to do with these ranked videos more. I kind of just want to go a bit more, kind of like flesh it out, make them a bit more kind of just creative, I guess. But that couldn't have been possible if it weren't for the help of people, if it weren't for the help of my girlfriend Mari, who contributed with shooting some of these video shots, because obviously I can't exist in two places at once. Also just for being generally supportive and looking over the script and other things like that. Other people that helped out were the other voices you might have heard. I'm not a good imitator, so yeah, they were other people's voices. That was Rick, Joey, otherwise known as Biopath, and Stefan. I'll link to their Twitters, as well as Rick's YouTube, because yeah, they're great people and I like how supportive this community is, and just yeah, it helped out a lot, and hopefully you'll see more of these people in future videos, depending on what I'm doing, because I really do want to kind of make these bigger videos, maybe not so much more regularly, but I want to basically be this channel, have my album reviews, but also have these kind of bigger videos, like every kind of 5 or 6 weeks or something like that. Also, thank you to Josh for the new channel art, because it looks very nice, and you'll see it in the end slate at the end of this video, as well as when you went on this channel probably. But yeah, now that I think of it, like the whole reason we're here was because of me dying, and I can't, he's not here, and off to Rick and Morty convention. See you later. Well, that's good to know. I've kind of just wasted a good half an hour of my life. So yeah, thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay hydrated.
Yeah.